This is Pakistan. Once the fastest growing nation in Asia is now going bankrupt. Pakistanis are running out of food, currency is running out of value, and politicians, they're running out of options.
मैं सऊदी अरब से होके आया हूँ, मैं यूएई के होके अभी मैं तुर्की होके आया हूँ और मैंने उन भाइयों को कहा कि आप हमारे बड़े अजीम भाई हैं, हमेशा आपने हमारी मदद की और मैंने यही कहा जब मैं आया हूँ तो आप समझेंगे शायद ये मांगने आया है, मैं मांगने नहीं आया लेकिन मजबूरी है.
As I mentioned in my Sri Lanka video, the perfect storm is spreading and it will take down many more countries. Pakistan is just next on the list. Pakistan could face the same reality as Sri Lanka, where people are without food, electricity, and essential supplies like medicine. Currently, Pakistan is facing Asia's second highest inflation, only behind already bankrupt Sri Lanka. But unlike Sri Lanka, Pakistan has faced economic hardship many times in its short history. This time, though, the situation may be more dire than it's ever been.
हमने कभी भी ऐसा 35 सालों में इस्लामाबाद में ऐसा हाल नहीं देखे. इतना हालात खराब हमने नहीं देखे.
In Pakistan, the price of fuel jumped by 17%.
Islamabad now has barely enough forex for 6 weeks of imports.
Pakistan is attempting to secure a bailout from the International Monetary Fund.
To be eligible for the bailout, Pakistan's government has taken unpopular measures.
Will it be the next country to go Sri Lanka's way?
Okay, so YouTube has been restricting my videos about the protests and other controversial topics like this one. This in turn hurts the reach of my videos. So if you guys have been finding my videos useful and informational, it would mean the world to me if you would just scroll down and give this video a like. It just helps me out a lot with the algorithm while covering controversial topics like the crash of Pakistan. Pakistan, though a popular nation in global news, is actually quite new. It was created by the British government in 1947 after they ended their rule over the Southeast Asian region. Surprisingly, Pakistan quickly became the fastest growing nation in all of Asia after its independence, surpassing the likes of both China and India. But the growth didn't last long. In its 75 years of history, Pakistan has had a total of 29 prime ministers, but not a single one has completed a full term. Political instability has been an unfortunate part of Pakistan's history, which makes it hard for the country to sustain any meaningful progress. For any developing nation in modern history, the most important tool for fast growth is foreign investment. Pakistan can look at the success of foreign investments right at its border with both India and China. Unfortunately, it's hard to attract this investment without political stability. Because of the shaky history, every administration always focuses on short-term policies in order to keep the public happy, instead of focusing on long-term improvements that strengthen the country's economy. Subsidies and tax cuts are important tools in the governmental arsenal, but they can be disastrous when used to win elections instead of managing the economy. Every administration came into power trying to fix the problems caused by its predecessor, but slowly changed course as they realized that in order to keep power, they needed to keep the public happy. Constant tax cuts and subsidies have decimated the government balance sheet, and the country is addicted to loans like no other. Because of all of this, growth of the economy has been all over the place, and Pakistan has been nicknamed the sick man of Asia.
This is China's Belt and Road Initiative, the most ambitious infrastructure project in modern history.
So the Belt and Road Initiative is this trillion-dollar project that China has started to connect itself.
Shipping lanes running from China through Southeast Asia, Africa, and all the way to Europe.
The head of MI6 last year accused China of using debt traps.
Over-dependence on China has landed Pakistan in a debt trap.
If they all ask for the debt relief, it will cause huge debt burden for China.
This time, the story is no different. But to understand the true scale of this economic mismanagement, let's back up a little bit to 2017, when the past administration was ousted after the Prime Minister's corruption came to light. New party head Imran Khan ran on a platform of fighting corruption and poverty and was able to win fairly comfortably. The new government was granted a growing economy, but that didn't mean problems weren't there. Pakistan's growth was mostly funded by debt. One of those creditors is Pakistan's friendly ally, China, who wasn't so friendly when setting the terms of that debt. Currently, Pakistan has around $14.5 billion in outstanding loans from China, but that doesn't include the whole story. There are other types of loans that are not reflected in budget documents, such as $11.4 billion from China's state banks. These loans from China are different from loans that come from the World Bank, IMF, or any other country. Usually, loans have interest rates ranging from 1% to 3% and payback periods of 30 years. But Chinese loans have a surprisingly high rate of 4.5% to 6%, with a payback period of only 10 to 15 years. On top of all these outrageous terms, Chinese loans also come with a requirement that projects are handed to Chinese companies who mostly employ Chinese workers. So most of the money ends up finding its way back to the Chinese economy, while countries like Pakistan are left with massive loans and infrastructure that's controlled by China. When China's Belt and Road Initiative was initially launched, Sri Lanka and Pakistan were supposed to be a major beneficiary of those funds. But now both of these countries are facing bankruptcy, and BRI loans played a big part in dragging them down. Remember how I mentioned that all the projects built using China's money are basically controlled by the CCP? Well, that's because Chinese companies are the ones operating these services, even though they are in different countries. As part of its infrastructure initiative, China built 12 power plants in Pakistan that were run by Chinese companies. As Pakistan's struggles grew, it was unable to make payments of its Chinese loans. So what does China do in this time of need? Instead of helping out a struggling ally, China decided to shut down all the 12 power plants unless Pakistan made a payment up front. Now, the citizens were already struggling with regular blackouts during record heat, and stoppage of these power plants definitely is not helping the situation. The IMF is willing to help Pakistan pay off its late payments to China, but the IMF wants Pakistan to renegotiate out of unfavorable terms from its China loans. Otherwise, any IMF help would be a temporary bandage instead of a long-term solution. Of course, all blame can't be placed on China, as these countries' politicians played a crucial role in mismanaging their delicate economy. As a developing nation, Pakistan depends mostly on imports to keep its citizens happy. Energy was mostly imported, medicine was mostly imported, and even a big portion of the country's food was imported. Because of heavy imports, Pakistan is no stranger to overspending past its budget. The country has turned to the IMF over 30 times to ask for help whenever it gets in trouble. Similarly to Sri Lanka, problems were always there, but they became more evident as global economic tides turned. What may come as a surprise to many, COVID actually helped Pakistan's economy to an extent. That's not something you hear often. During COVID, the local demand for necessities like gas dropped significantly. Because of this, the government was able to take a breather from borrowing money to provide for its people. Unfortunately, this relief was only temporary. As the economy opened back up after the lockdown, the debt pressure on the country's finances increased. Now, you guys probably know what happened that just pushed the whole world into chaos.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
It was unprovoked.
Airstrikes hitting large cities, and thousands of people attempting to flee the Ukrainian capital, Kiev.
Cruise missiles, rockets, and artillery struck 25 cities, according to Ukraine.
Air raid sirens blared in Kiev.
Everyone here is shocked. Ukraine is fighting for its right to exist as a sovereign country.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine sent oil prices to the moon and put extreme pressure on Pakistan's food imports. This is when all that political instability reared its ugly head. As the economic situation got worse, the government became more focused on staying in power instead of steering the economy in the right direction. History repeated itself and the administration started implementing short-term, detrimental policies to win political favor. As the gas prices were rising globally, Pakistan had some of the cheapest oil prices in the world. Well, how? How did they do that, you might ask? Well, subsidies! The government put a cap on oil prices and started to subsidize it using loans. These subsidies alone were costing Pakistan more than $600 million per month. Unfortunately for the politicians, these subsidies weren't enough, and the government was eventually ousted in April through a vote of no confidence in Parliament. And the new government is just facing similar challenges, but at an even worse economic time. The administration knew that removing these subsidies wasn't going to help them politically, but keeping these subsidies meant the country would go bankrupt. So after the demand from the IMF, Pakistan removed the cap on gas prices and opened the doors to an IMF bailout. And these problems aren't done yet. Ousted Prime Minister Khan is taking advantage of public outrage over higher gas prices and calling for an early election. This is giving rise to the same political instability that has haunted Pakistan's economy in the past. This one quote encapsulated Pakistan's rocky history. Politicians play politics while citizens suffer. Well, I guess you can apply this to every nation in the world, really.
Two neighbors are struggling with the debt crisis.
Now, to boost its dwindling foreign exchange reserves, Pakistani government is now looking at the wallet of its citizens.
There's a giant hole in their finances. It's just like Sri Lanka, Pakistan is running out of foreign reserves.
This is the Pakistani rupee. It's in a free fall, losing more than 10% of its value in a mere 3 days. This isn't just a cryptocurrency getting rug pulled overnight. This drop represents a serious problem for the government and its people. Another big issue that rises from being an import-dependent nation is that you have to have cheap access to US dollars, as that is the world's reserve currency. Pakistan's foreign reserves are rapidly declining. It went from around $20 billion at the start of the year to less than $10 billion in July. Currently, it only has enough reserves to continue imports for the next 2 months. After that, the country is facing bankruptcy, just like Sri Lanka. To decrease its import bills, the government is asking citizens to drink less tea, as Pakistan currently spends around $600 million importing tea. Officials are encouraging citizens to work from home to reduce fuel use, and local administrations are cutting back on streetlights and transportation to save electricity. Currently, the government is expecting a $2 billion bailout from the IMF in August, but political instability in the country and China's unwillingness to negotiate previous loan terms are delaying more relief. Unfortunately, even more relief is not a long-term solution for Pakistan's economy. There needs to be structural improvement in the country's tax policy and active steps against rampant corruption, both of which are hard to do without political stability. Topics like this, or basically covering anything CCP related, isn't too fun on YouTube. Videos are bombarded with dislikes and pro-CCP comments by their bots. Worse yet, sometimes even YouTube restricts these videos because they claim it's inappropriate. So it would help me out a lot if you guys drop a like on the video. Support on my recent videos has been insane, so I really do thank you guys. This kind of reach wouldn't be possible without you all. Also, we have membership and a Patreon now if you want to support the channel.